Hi, my name is Mark Selden, and I'm with the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, which I co-founded, and I'm the Director of Operations there. I also founded and own Renaissance Montessori School in Cary, North Carolina. I've consulted for the Montessori Foundation, and I have friends throughout the Montessori community, and that's why I know how important it is that we come together as a community to support each other, especially as school heads. We have a lot of responsibilities that just can't be shirked, even in these difficult economic times. As you know, even if we're not using as much electricity, we still need to keep those lights on. We need to pay our employees. At least we'd like to try, right? Our rent is not negotiable. There are things we have to do. Right now, in Cary, North Carolina, where I live, my school is closed for the next 2 weeks, and it may be longer. That's just a minimal estimate at this point. So the question I have from parents is, when are you going to reopen? And are you going to keep collecting tuition? And as a school owner, I can tell you that my fixed expenses are not small. Our salaries are about $50,000 a month. We have our mortgage, rent, and it's just, there's a lot of non-negotiables that we have to figure out how to handle. So I have an MBA, and I also have, as I said, started and run a Montessori school. I also have helped create a Montessori leadership program that helps school heads think about how to run schools, and my expertise is on the financial side. So I thought I might have a few things to share. I want to say, though, that before I share these insights, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm really inviting you to a larger conversation that the Montessori Foundation is trying to start. And we'll have a link at the bottom of this video. Basically, this is just an overview. There's a lot of details that we can only go through together. And I hope you will join this conversation, and we'll be able to explore these ideas and really find ways to support ourselves in our communities. So to begin, difficult economic times are not a new thing. This is new in that we're talking about a macroeconomic event, a black swan, as they say. It's completely unexpected. This virus has shut down the economy more or less throughout most of the world, and certainly here in the United States where I live. So our question is, what do we do to weather these economic storms? And I'd like to take some advice or share some advice that I have shared with other people in the past, and maybe adapt a little bit. So to begin, whenever you're trying to figure out how to handle a financial crisis, you need to look at your inputs and your outputs. So your inputs, as you might expect, are your income. What are you taking in? And your outputs are what are you sending out? What are you paying? What are your bills? Might go without saying, but we want to keep our income as high as possible and our outputs as low as possible. So let's look through this. So the first thing to think about is our income. We would like it to be as steady as possible. I would urge schools as long as possible to keep charging tuition. We do need to do things for our schools. It is not sufficient to just charge and provide nothing. I know that Leanne, who is my school director right now, is hosting daily children's book live readings. We need to do things to help support our parents in this difficult time. We're also going to have to do other things at the end of this crisis. I do urge you to not give refunds if at all possible. I think there's a couple things that are wrong with that line of thinking. The first is, of course, that as Montessori schools, we may not simply be able to afford to give everyone a refund, right? We just don't have these enormous reservoirs of cash, and many of us are already operating in fairly thin margins. So this could be a very difficult thing to do. And if you give one person a refund, then other people are going to find out, and next thing you know, you're trying to figure out how to handle an economic crisis of your own. So my suggestion is you don't offer refunds. In future times, I'm hoping that we can find ways of offering discounts, doing other things for our parents to make up for this economic hardship that we're asking of them. But we do have, a responsibility to try to keep our employees, fed and alive, and our schools open. We are not an by the hour daycare. My school is a premium year-long commitment, and I expect parents to honor that year-long commitment. That doesn't mean that they like it. Right now they have to pay for babysitters or some kind of daycare. I mean, even if they're trying to work at home, it's very difficult with children around, young children around. And so my thought is, we need to start not from a financial place, but from an emotional place. We're businesses, but we're also communities. And if we forget for even a second that this is a difficult time for everyone and that we're all in it together, then parents are going to start seeing us as bad people, the outsiders, as people who are not there for their families. And they're going to be a lot less sympathetic to our needs. So think about your community. If you have a strong community, you're already in a better place than those who do not. Unfortunately, my school does. But the question is, what do you do to keep those communities strong in this period? Because if you don't do those things, then the financial piece is just it's gonna flow out. The consequences of a weak community are gonna be bad financial outcomes for you in this time. So think about that. Everything you can do, resources you can provide parents, extra support, emotional support, maybe check in with them as often as possible, depending on the size of your school. It may be possible for the school head themselves to call every parent a couple times a week. What you want to do is to be available and purposefully supportive, not in a superficial way. Look for things you can do. If there's a family member at your school who needs help, be there for them. See if they can support each other. This could be an opportunity for school communities to even get stronger. It really comes down to what you do as the head of school. And that makes the financial ask that much easier to bear, as you might expect. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to convince people that they should continue providing those inputs. It's not going to work indefinitely. If this crisis goes on for a couple of months, people are not going to be paying you tuition, even with promises of discounts or whatnot in the future. So this is not supposed to be a cure-all. This is just a general piece of advice. We would like them to not see us as an organization that they're paying by the week, and if we don't provide a certain week, then they're not getting their service, and therefore are deserving of a refund. Obviously, we don't pay our employees that way, so, and presumably they're not paid that way by their own businesses as well. And I would dearly love to be able to call Wells Fargo and tell them that, I don't have any customers this week, so please give me a break on my mortgage. But I don't think they'd be entirely sympathetic. I could be wrong. There's always that possibility, but I wouldn't count on it. And I don't think you should count on it either. So in terms of inputs, like I said, my big takeaway is try to continue on. Try to continue taking in as much money as you can from whoever can afford it. Don't offer refunds if at all possible. And just remain strong and steadfast and be consistent. Every time the issue of money comes up, what I see as most damaging is a lack of clarity and a lack of consistency. Make sure your policy is very, very clear and well communicated. Now, I'm not saying that I would necessarily start by broadcasting to the community. I wouldn't send them a one-sentence email saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm not giving you any refunds." I wouldn't start with that. I would start by talking about ways we're supporting you and the things we're doing, and then if parents ask, I would offer information about what you can and can't do for them financially right now. Remember, they do want a school to come back to after this is all over, and I'd remind them of that. I'd remind them how much they value their children's teachers and all those things. Unfortunately, a lot of people do simple math. They think, oh, I'm paying whatever it is, thousands of dollars a year for this school, and therefore I know that the school head is rich and the school is rich and they can afford to do blah, blah, blah for me. And, we know what our budgets look like. We know that's just not true for most of us. It certainly isn't for me. All right, so that's the input side. The output side, I'm going to really strongly encourage you to keep paying your staff to whatever extent you can. Don't cut back on salaries. Don't cut back on hourly employees. These people need your help. It is very demoralizing when people take pay cuts. I've had this conversation with my father recently. I think it's much, much worse to give across the board percentage discounts than it is to necessarily let people go. I don't generally advise letting people go if you can avoid it. I'm not crazy about firing people, but sometimes you have to. But if given a choice, really avoid those across the board pay cuts, because it does not inspire that sense of camaraderie. We're all in it together. Look at this, we're all taking a pay cut, and there's no bonding over that. There's just misery over that. And generally a suspicion that maybe some other people aren't getting that pay cut, and especially the heads. And so it is not an encouraging thing. The other thing I wanted to say about outputs, is very simply that we need to slow down our expenses. Unless you magically are able to keep your income consistent for all eternity, you're still going to have this issue of how are you going to make sure that you're not overspending. So let me give you a couple pieces of advice. The first thing is go through all of your expenses and look for anything that can be delayed. Like I don't need to buy that this month or that next month. Look for things that are non-essential. And you may need to look at bills that simply, have a longer window. I don't need to, maybe I can pay this bill next month instead of this month. What you're going to have to do is be vigilant. And that means going through all of your expenses very carefully. Like I said, I do not recommend that those things you trim include employees, except maybe yourself, but certainly not, your educational staff. I do recommend you look for anything you can do. If those buildings are unoccupied, make sure the electricity is off, or not off, but all the usage is as low as possible. The HVAC usage is low. Go through and check for everything you can do to reduce expenses in this period. That's basically it. Your inputs need to be up, your outputs need to be low. You want to make sure your income's high and your expenses are sustainable. I do encourage you to join the conversation we're having. This was just an overview. Really, as I said, the details are the harder part. And so I'm going to ask you to consider clicking the link below and joining the conversation so that we can actually talk about the specifics of your circumstances. Good luck, stay strong, and I hope your communities are healthy and happy.